There are some things that are very, very sensitive, because I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, as you can understand, that we are in negotiations with some potential employers, not only just with Cape Breton, but also mainland Nova Scotia, that at this point in time, because of confidentiality, I'm not in a position to comment. Hopefully, in the weeks and in the months ahead, that we will have more announcements. And Mr. Speaker, we've already made some announcements, and we will continue to make those solid investments, not only in Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker, but all of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Presently, lobster is selling for approximately $5 a pound in LFA 34. But you know what? The lobster fishers are very upset. They like to have at least $5.50. And now there's a strike. We talked about the 1688 Professional Lobster Fishers Association. Of course, that support is beginning to soften. Yesterday, in the minister's own constituency, close to his hometown, there was a bit of a, I would call it a little bit of a showdown. And the RCMP ended up being on scene. So there's a lot of things going on. So my question to the minister is, what role is he playing to try to get tempers in this issue to calm down just a little bit?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And to the member opposite, this is certainly a timely question at this time. I want to tell you what we are doing. And first of all, I can tell you within almost to the minute that all three parties, or the parties, are meeting as we speak in Southwest Nova Scotia. This is a very interesting issue that has to be dealt with. And I encourage the meetings to continue, and they've been going on for the last 72 hours and the following days. But I want to tell the member opposite what we have been doing, not only as a minister, but as a government, is that we are there standing up for independent fishers. We have improved the Fisheries Loan Board. We have put investments into the Lobster Council, who are going across the Atlantic provinces, and they're conducting a consultation process, and that information will be coming back at the end of this month. And we have moved jobs from Halifax to rural Nova Scotia. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that if Shelburne and Digby were goalposts, we just scored into an empty net. Mr. Speaker, all the above, this similar situation that the member from Argyll brings forward happened in 1991, and the members opposite could only wish that they did any of the above. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Argyll on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what we've seen from this minister is pretty much nothing when it comes to this issue over the last few days. They've been on strike since Thursday. I haven't heard a word come out of the department. I haven't heard a word of how they're going to address the issue of pricing. All of a sudden, the fishermen, you know, they sort of didn't close ranks on this. So all of a sudden, we've got half the fishermen that want to go fishing. You have the other half of the fishermen that want to hold on for the strike. They had baseball bats and sticks on the wharf yesterday morning. The RCMP were on scene. We have a director, apparently, of the 1688 that doesn't want to talk to the minister. The minister doesn't want to talk to the director of the folks of 1688. So what is he doing? There's a meeting at 4 o'clock in his own constituency. So I'm wondering, is he going to be going to it or not?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And to the member opposite, you made reference to 1688. And not speaking to an executive, I can tell you, with less than a few minutes ago, I was speaking to the head of that association. So the member opposite needs to get his facts straight. I asked him to repeat and review Hanson. We have done more in 36 months for the inshore fishery than the members opposite have done since the golden age of sail. Thank you very much for the question.
The honourable member for Argyll on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I can't take what comes out of that guy's mouth, I can tell you. Because I tell you, it needs a little salt bait, or maybe we should put it in a pot and use it for bait for the next fishing season. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, there are people in our communities, and in his community, and in my community of Argyll, that are very upset with the inaction of this government. The absolute inaction of this government. The price is too low. They've almost done nothing in order to fix that. There are meetings that are going on that the minister doesn't feel that he should attend. So I'm going to ask, there's one at 4 o'clock. I think it's 4 o'clock on Wednesday. I can't get that far anyway. I tried to try. But ultimately, there's a meeting on Friday night. I'm wondering if the minister will be attending or not, but I can tell you that this member will be attending that meeting at the Mariner Centre in Yarmouth on Friday.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the member opposite, you forgot to mention his cousins in Ottawa, the federal Conservatives. Mr. Speaker, the federal government has taken jobs away from rural Nova Scotia, and where the minister?
Order. I said order. That's the last time I'm going to say order. I'll remove you from the chamber if you disobey the chair. Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Again, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind the member opposite that his federal cousins has taken jobs out of rural Nova Scotia in the last weeks. This government has put jobs back. We'll stand by our independent fishermen, and we have been talking with this group, and I encourage that consultation to go on, and they are meeting as we're meeting here today. Thank you very much for the question.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the second year in a row, this NDP government has cut funding to legal aid. This year, the Minister of Justice has allotted $184,000 less for legal aid than last year. Last year, there was a cut to legal aid of $553,000. Access to legal services for low-income Nova Scotians is a challenge, but for this minister to cut supports to Nova Scotia legal aid for a second year in a row only makes things more difficult.
Order. Time for oral questions put to members by ministers has expired. I will now recognize the government host leader to call business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call private and local bills for second reading?
Private and local bills for second reading.
Could you please call Bill number 57, the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act?
Bill number 57, the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to stand to move second reading of an act to amend the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act. And I'm particularly pleased to do that because I have some history that relates, some personal history that relates to that act. It was created by members of this House in 2003, or the original act was. And its purpose at the time was to manage the funds which had grown to, had accumulated to about $250,000. The trust fund that was created had been organized by the various programs that eventually became called addiction services, probably beginning in the late 1970s. And by 2003, as I've said, the amount of money in that fund had grown to quite a substantial size. And it was built bits and pieces at a time. It was built actually by the payment of fines that might have been imposed by judges on people who had committed offenses, and they were ordered to pay restitution to addiction services, perhaps because alcohol or drug use had figured in their crime. It was built by donations to the program by grateful clients who had found a better future after having used the services of the program. It was built by contributions from grateful family members who had been relieved changes that had occurred in their own lives as a result of treatment that had been received by that program. And it was built by sometimes rather significant bequests from family members who had written the welfare of the program into their wills. And I think all of that work over quite a considerable amount of time and the growth of the fund speaks to both to the problem of addictions in our community, to the problems related to alcohol and other drugs and gambling, but also speaks to the amount of hope that's possible, because it's very clear that when treated, addictions can be treated quite successfully. But in 2003, there were some significant changes that were made to the addiction services programming in the Annapolis Valley, all of which have been housed until that date with some very minor exceptions in one location on the grounds of what's now known as Valley Regional Hospital. And and it also, one of the things that led to that change was that the detox program that was located there had been staffed in part with supervisory services provided by the hospital, and those were withdrawn because of budget concerns at that point. And as I was a manager of the program at that stage, and as we looked at what was happening in the program, we decided that it was necessary to rethink and to be more imaginative in how we used our own resources. And we took the decision to move the addiction services program from that one location to several locations throughout the Annapolis Valley. And the result of that action, Mr. Speaker, was to create resources that now exist not only in Kentville, but in Wolfville, in Berwick, in Middleton, in Annapolis Royal. There are now services for youth that exist in every junior and senior high school in Kings and Annapolis counties. And all of those things, I think, have made the services more accessible to people who live in the Annapolis Valley. It also led to a professionally staffed 24-hour detoxification program, something that had not existed before, that put our program on a footing that it needed to be on, and it created the opportunity to build an evidence-based, structured residential treatment program housed in a purpose-built facility, something that we had never had before. But apart from those positive things, a question arose as to who had ownership of that $250,000 fund. And the answer to that question became the creation of the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act and an act of this legislative session in 2003. In that initial decision, the purpose of the act was to allow funds from that have been accumulated to be administered by a board of directors in the form of a trust, and to be dispersed through decisions of the board in a particular way for purposes of meeting the needs of addictions treatment throughout the Annapolis Valley. And the board was created for that purpose and acted for that purpose for several years. But in 2008, in an initial amendment to the act, this legislature agreed that the act should be modified to require the board of directors to use all of the funds in the act for the purpose of the nonprofit society that's known as the Crosby House Society, a nonprofit treatment program that was created and now exists in New Minas. The board of the trust, a couple of years, I guess 3 or 4 years now, since that decision was reached, has determined that if in fact they need to use all of the funds for the purpose of the Crosby House Society, it might in fact be beneficial to turn the remaining funds, which are in the vicinity of about $100,000, over to the use of the Crosby House Society board, who will in fact be in a position to use that money in any case. And I think that's a reasonable decision, Mr. Speaker, a decision that will, in essence, allow the Crosby House Society to use the funds as it can best see fit, using a timetable that meets its own needs. And it will relieve those people who serve as members of the Crosby House Trust Board of the responsibility to simply meet and to rubber stamp the transfers of bits of money from one agency, one body to another. So I think, Mr. Speaker, this is a reasonable amendment. It will allow the Crosby House Trust to, in a sense, finish up its work. It will leave enough money in the trust to get a final financial statement so that it can wrap up its business. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just wanted to say those few words, wanted to recount a little bit of the history of that work, and wanted to end by moving second reading of the an act to Bill 57. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise in my place today and speak for a few minutes about the Crosby Society and its place in addictions treatment in our province. The Crosby Centre, of course, was founded by Dr. Jack Crosby, and was a fixture, of course, in the Valley. Probably now for probably about 30 years ago, and it was associated with the Miller Hospital and was located on the grounds and publicly funded. And the 28-day treatment program, in fact, became established both in the province and outside. As in fact one of the really fine small institutions in terms of treatment centers, and we know that the model changed, and the Crosby House and Crosby Society became defunct for a period of time. And really, it was really very little to do with the great work that was carried on by the Crosby Centre and the staff there. In fact, I know many people, in my community who talk about the lifelong benefits of the Crosby program, because one of the, I think, real hallmarks of the work of the Crosby Centre is that after you go there for your 28-day treatment program, and this was historically and carries on today, is that you are not lost from the availability of the professional staff and the resources that Crosby House continues to offer. In fact, just recently, on a visit to Crosby House, I was chatting with one of the staff members who wasn't available when I first arrived there. Didn't know they were around the facility, and in fact they had been working to track a client who had been there some months earlier, that they hadn't heard from for a period of time. And they were wanting to do, again, that kind of preventive measures, just to see how their adjustment back into community and if they needed any ongoing supports. So to see a program that, in fact, doesn't end when you leave their doors is not really part of many programs that exist. And in fact, in many programs, you are left on your own. You may be given the name of a counselor that you could possibly go to, but the Crosby House program guarantees you access to their facility to talk to a person 24/7. And I think that's really what has been so wonderful and so advantageous about that program. So we lost it for a number of years, and it really came. It did come back in part because some of the former staff members like George Libby, and again doctors who had been associated with the program, in fact, found the new program to be wanting. There were many aspects of it, in fact, that were called into question on again by professionals. This is not hearsay. This is our professionals who found, in fact, some aspects of the 21-day program insufficient in the treatment required. So also, there were people who went through the program, the 21-day program, or especially, of course, a number of our government and large businesses that wanted something other than the 21-day program. And they wanted an in-house residential program. So government agencies, the RCMP, the Canadian Forces, Michelin, many of these said, look, we will secure places at the 28-day treatment center. So in 2003, maybe a little bit before, there was a movement to start to bring the Crosby Centre back. And of course, it was successful. And however, it had to become a privately funded institution. And so every person that goes there now, in fact, has to pay their way, or the company in which they work for, pay for their program. And once again, the Crosby Centre is in fact very often asked to be at more than 100% capacity. They've had to rent some rooms in another part of the community in order to accommodate their programs. So this bill, I think, is a good bill to help the society clean up the books and allow them to take the monies available that were donated to the work of the Crosby Centre and see them available to assist their program. So as this bill moves on to law amendments, or it may just actually move through the House in a speedy manner, I think that will be a positive thing. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity for a few words on the bill.
Thank you. If I am to recognize the honourable member for Kings North, it will be to close debate on Bill number 57, Crosby Memorial Trust Fund. The honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we close debate on Bill 57.
The question is the host ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Opposed say nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 57, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 17 of the Acts of 2003, the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act.
Order the bill be referred to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could you please call public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Could you please call Bill number 71, the Assessment Act?
Bill number 71, the Assessment Act. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Bill number 71 be read for a second time. As Minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations, I'm pleased to speak to the amendments to the Assessment Act that will improve the property assessment system. These changes are expected to bring more clarity, improved efficiency, and greater transparency to the appeal process. The amendments deal with extensions to the appeal periods. They also include some administrative changes dealing with the Regional Assessment Appeal Court. Mr. Speaker, first I'd like to speak to the change around the time frames for property assessment appeals. Essentially, it would extend the appeal period by an additional 10 days. There are 4 levels of appeal in Nova Scotia. The first is an assessor review by the Property Valuation Services Corporation, a fairly informal process. The second is an appeal that goes to the Regional Assessment Appeal Court. And the third level is the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. And the fourth and highest level is the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal, which hears questions of law only, not assessed value. Fortunately, the number of assessment appeals is very low, and I think it speaks well of the system that less than 2% of assessments are appealed. But for those who do appeal, a common problem is the very short period to prepare for and file an appeal. Currently, Nova Scotia property owners have 21 days to appeal their assessments from the date the assessment notices from the Property Valuation Services Corporation are mailed. And Mr. Speaker, that is the shortest property assessment appeal period in Canada. We are proposing that the appeal period would be extended to 31 days. The additional 10 days would benefit ratepayers in two ways. It would give them more time to determine whether to proceed with an appeal or not, and it would give them more time to research and properly prepare an appeal should they decide to proceed. Under the current legislation, after an appeal is filed by the PVSC, property owners who disagree with an amended or confirmed assessment have only 7 days to appeal that decision. With this amendment, that period would extend to 14 days. Again, this would give ratepayers more time to prepare their cases. If an appeal is taken further to the Regional Assessment Appeal Court, the PVSC is currently required to give 6 days notice of a court hearing. Mr. Speaker, with the amendment now before the House, we are proposing the time be extended to 14 days, again, allowing appellants more time to prepare for the court hearing. We have consulted with the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities on these extensions, and they are supportive. There was also consultation with the interested stakeholders in the form of meetings and the invitation of written comments in February of this year. It included representatives of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the Nova Scotia Real Estate Appraisers Association, the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, the UNSM, private sector appraisal firms, Viewpoint Realty, and others. In keeping with our government's commitment to make the assessment appeal process easier for Nova Scotians, the proposed changes are designed to provide greater flexibility for those who may consider appealing a property assessment. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to speak to an amendment to change the name of the Regional Assessment Appeal Court and clarify its authority. This appeal body is, in fact, an administrative tribunal, not a court. We are proposing the name be changed to the Nova Scotia Assessment Appeal Tribunal. For many people, the word court can be intimidating. It carries with it connotations of authority and formality. And Mr. Speaker, on the other hand, the word tribunal makes it clear that the appeal process is less formal and more user-friendly than court proceedings. We want Nova Scotians who choose to appeal their assessments, often acting on their own behalf, to feel comfortable and not be intimidated by the appeal proceedings. The name change also addresses the fact that a regional court system no longer exists. The appeal system works on a province-wide basis. Property owners are still ensured by the Act that their appeal can be heard in the municipality where their property is located. As a result of the change away from the regional courts, some administrative changes to the Act are required to better clarify the role and the authority of the tribunal. Currently, the tribunal does not have clear authority to require disclosure of information from appellants or from assessors when conducting hearings. Tribunal members need that authority so they can have access to the information they require in order to make informed decisions. And Mr. Speaker, this will increase the efficiency and, most important, the transparency of the assessment appeal process. Administrative changes included in the amendment will provide flexibility as the appeals process continues to be reviewed. For instance, the minister will have the ability to set terms for tribunal members, designate a tribunal chair and vice chair, and if required, assign them additional duties. Cabinet will be given authority to make regulations with respect to the powers, structure, administration, or procedures of the tribunal. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we are also repealing one section of the Assessment Act to provide consistency between the Act and a Memorandum of Understanding between the province and the PVSC. The MOU was signed in October 2007 and states that the PVSC will pay for staff and facilities related to the appeal court. Repealing this section of the Act clarifies that this process will continue as originally intended through the MOU. In summary, I want to emphasize that these amendments are designed to provide flexibility, fairness, accessibility, and transparency as we work to improve the appeals process for the benefit of Nova Scotians. If approved, we hope to proclaim and implement this legislation in time for the 2013 assessment roll and appeals period, which begins in January 2013. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to any comments from my colleagues in the House. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I listened with great interest to the minister describing what this bill covers, and I think there's some good improvements in the bill. The minister must be shocked to hear that from me, but I believe there is some good improvements. The fact that people have longer time to appeal, I think is very positive. I would have liked to have seen the times that people have to appeal a little bit longer than what is proposed in the bill. However, what is proposed is an improvement. It's a step in the right direction. And unfortunately, a lot of times when people have their assessment notice come into their home, they sort of look at it and say, oh, I've got a few days to do this, and they lay it aside, and by the time they decide, it's too late. And indeed, they don't get to appeal. I personally feel that you should be able to appeal this any time through the year. You should be able to make an appeal on your property tax assessment any time. The only issue would be when it becomes effective, your appeal, if you were successful and win. It just puts a lot of restrictions on individuals that aren't really aware of what has to be done in an appeal process. And indeed, with the higher and higher property taxes we're seeing in the municipalities, it becomes more and more important to keep an eye on your assessment, which ultimately affects your property taxes that you pay. And I know with several occasions I've appealed mine with mixed results. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose, and sometimes the information isn't correct that the tax department have. And I remember years ago in a home I used to own, I appealed the taxes and we got it down slightly. And so lo and behold, the next year the assessor showed up and looked at the house and looked it all over, and he said, well, have you got a basement under that house? I said, no. He said, well, here in the code, which I didn't understand what the code was, as nobody would unless you're an assessor, you have a full basement under this property. I said, oh, that's interesting. He said, your assessment will probably go down. No, I've never seen that happen before when a property tax assessor shows up to your property to look this over, but I didn't understand what this code was. Nobody explained it to me at the hearing. And indeed, my assessment did go down, and I've been paying taxes on something I didn't have for about 20 years. So the process is not that good. It is not good. And another thing that irritated me about the whole process, when I went and made the appeal, I made the appeal before a lawyer, which was appointed by the government under the process, and the lawyer, I feel, was very competent. But after I left, I got the impression that the assessor who was there, myself and the lawyer that was there, stayed behind to discuss my case. That really perturbed me a little bit, considering that anything that should have been said about my property should have been said in my presence. So I think this system needs to be cleaned up, and I think it needs to be cleaned up a lot more than the minister's proposing here. Just a few extra days on when you can appeal it, changing it to a tribunal instead of a court, I guess that matters. Anyone's going to be intimidated. Anyone I've talked about that's going to appeal their assessment don't care if it's a court or a tribunal, so that doesn't really make a whole pile of difference. But the fact is, people still do not have a time when and if, and I know government will pass this bill and without amendments, so I'm sure, we don't have enough time to appeal their taxes. It takes a long time if you've never done it before and don't know how to don't understand how the system is, because most people don't. They really don't. and they have no need to until they get upset enough that they're paying too high taxes, and they finally decide we better appeal our tax our assessment to ensure our taxes don't go up any higher. And they are mad. They get upset. And I'm seeing more and more and more of that as people over time start to realize just what they're paying for, and how badly they're being charged for the services. And the fact that this government canceled the MOU with the municipalities and indeed increased taxes in some areas, and over the long run it's going to increase taxes everywhere. It's going to become more and more important to appeal your assessment. So I like the bill in principle. I think it's a step forward. It's not far enough. The step isn't far enough. I believe that the appeal process times for an individual to appeal, at least on the initial case, should be a lot longer. And I believe they keep it very short so the municipalities can plan how much money they've got to spend that year. I believe I remember from when I was minister that was the case. But indeed, what the minister says is only 50 appeals last year. That's not going to affect the cash flow of any municipality, absolutely zero. So I don't see why the 30 days or 31 days they're proposing from the time it is mailed. That doesn't mean you'll get it in time. You may only have 3 or 4 days after you get it to appeal it. Why that couldn't be extended to 90 days or 120 days, at least give people lots of time to realize what's going on and improve that. So with those few comments, I'll take my seat and be interested to see what the minister wraps up this with and how this bill proceeds through law amendments, and hopefully the amendment will be made to extend that at least at one time. Thank you.
If I am to recognize the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, it'll be to close debate on Bill number 71, the Assessment Act.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the whole point of the change that I talked about was to make the process flow more easily. Something that the member may not recognize, but certainly the cap on assessment has reduced the number of appeals that come forward. It's quite predictable, people's assessments. But also, one of the complaints I actually heard as an MLA from one of my constituents, was the issue, once he had heard back from PVSC and they denied his appeal, his ability to appeal that decision was 7 days. And if that happens over a weekend, then the days of the weekend are included in the 7th. And so we felt that additional time was necessary. Now, I'm thinking that there is some onus on the homeowner to do their due diligence. I mean, waiting for 90 days or any time in the year to appeal, and then, then the possibility, I guess, are we assuming that there'll have to be a rebate back to them or whatever? But this is fairly much in line with jurisdictions across the country. We were, I think, generally a little short on the appeal period, and so I think for sure this brings us in line with other jurisdictions. I think our desire is, because assessment is done through the municipalities. In other words, PVSC is basically paid for by the municipalities. And so I think what the member's suggesting by keeping it more open-ended is really going to add, I think, an element of more cost by dragging, restarting that process. In other words, they can deal with the assessments they get. They know within a certain period of time that they can have them dealt with, and then they're done for that year. So the fact that there's only 2% of assessments are appealed indicates that the demand is not great, that Nova Scotians by and large are quite satisfied with their appeals. And then the question of how many of those that they see proceed further, because quite often if they appeal, then they really don't, quite often don't consider reappealing that decision. I think what may happen in the next piece of legislation, Bill 73, when we get to it, is the one that allows for property sales information. Then once they can identify what homes are selling for, the market values in their immediate area, that will probably either make people decide that they're somewhere in the ballpark and that their assessment is appropriate, and or it could have the opposite effect, and may find out that theirs is high compared to what they're selling. We think it'll be more apt to be the former, that you know, that they'll see that they're somewhere in the range. So I appreciate the comments of my colleague from Preston, and so I look forward to the bill moving through the process, going to law amendments, and I move adjournment of debate and second reading on.
The question is for second reading of Bill number 71.
Move
is the
second
House
reading
ready for the question?
Bill 71.
He already moved it. Yeah. The House ready for the question? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Carried.
Bill number 71, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 23 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Assessment Act.
Order that the bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. I now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm used to having my back. Who? No, he doesn't. He wants to be. He loves you. Mr. Speaker, could you please call Bill 73, Municipal Government Act?
Bill number 73, Municipal Government Act. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill number 73 now be read for a second time. The proposed change is an important amendment to the Municipal Government Act. Simply stated, this amendment would allow for the disclosure and publication of property sales information.
No.
Currently, Nova Scotia is the only province in Canada that does not disclose property sales prices to the public. The current practice is for the Property Valuation Services Corporation, the agency which assesses property in Nova Scotia, to release sales information upon request to property owners who appeal their assessments. Mr. Speaker, this is problematic for several reasons. First, few who appeal know what they should ask for that they should ask for this information in order to properly prepare an appeal, and the risk that PVSC could appear to be biased in deciding what information to release rather than appellates assessing the information directly. And the information PVSC provides is not available online. With this amendment, publishing real estate sales information as documented in deed transfer tax affidavits would be permitted. This would be the most accurate source of information because deed transfer taxes are calculated on actual property sales prices. With this information, property owners would be in a better position to determine whether or not to appeal their assessments. Madam Speaker, it would provide them with easier access to comparable real estate sales information in their neighborhoods or communities. Making this information available could help reduce the number of appeals and possibly help reduce the costs of appeals to the Property Valuation Services Corporation and the province. So as you know, Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations pays the per diems and travel expenses for appeals court members, so fewer appeals could help save more money. In addition to the benefit to property owners, the sales information would be useful to assessors and to real estate appraisers as well as buyers and sellers. In order to implement this change in time for the 2013 assessment roll and for it to benefit Nova Scotia property owners at that time, it would have to be retroactive to 2010. Otherwise, the benefit would be delayed until year 2015. Madam Speaker, in summary, this amendment will make reliable information on real estate sales available to all Nova Scotians and provide easy access to information needed if appealing an assessment. It is good legislation for Nova Scotians and will make Nova Scotia practices consistent with the rest of the country. More important, it will contribute to our ongoing effort to make the property assessment appeal process simpler, more efficient, and more transparent. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is another one of those acts I think that makes a lot of sense. It does provide the information that many people want for more reasons than just appealing your property taxes. And I would think that that would be quite useful information to be available in other cases as well. I was wondering maybe the minister could answer this question when he closes debate on this bill. Is this information going to be readily available to anyone that wants to see it? I would hope that's the case, and without having to go through a long litany of difficulties trying to find the information. And with that, the bill seems to be reasonably good, not much substance to it, but it's there, and hopefully it will help some individuals, and I doubt very much if it'll save the province any money, but indeed, probably when people see what other houses are selling for and what theirs are appraised for, they might be quite interested to appeal their taxes and see just how things are happening, and indeed if the property values are increasing as much as the real estate people make them think they are. So with those few words, I'd like to hopefully the minister be able to comment on how this information is going to be made available to the general population as it goes on. Thank you.
If I'm to recognize the Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relation, it would be to move to close debate. Sorry.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I guess the concern I think that we have is twofold. One is that we provide the best information we can to Nova Scotians. The second one is that we're in line with what Canadians across the country can have access to information that's similar. So if Canadians in all the other provinces have access to this information on sales data for their particular province, then we certainly think that time is overdue for Nova Scotians to have access to the same thing. I'm not sure to agree or disagree. I mean, with my colleague opposite, it is I guess everybody, if you tax them based on their assessment, Madam Speaker, most people worry that their assessment is too high, but if you ask them what would you ask for if you were selling it, then you might get a different number. So certainly having access to sales information of homes in your region or your immediate area certainly provides a good backdrop for people to determine whether or not they're interested in appealing. And I think I'm more inclined to believe that it would probably reduce the number of appeals. The cost to the province, I'm thinking, would go down since we pay for the members who are going to be on the tribunal, since we're changing it to the appeal court to a tribunal, and so it's only in those cases when appeals go to that extent that's when we incur a cost. But I think I would expect that with this information, that will not be the case, Mr. Speaker. One of the advantages, this information, however it'll be put out, is for all Nova Scotians to have access to it. I want the member from Preston to know that the whole purpose of this piece of legislation is to ensure that Nova Scotia property owners have access to what the market values are or sales values are in their particular area. And you can get some of that information on Viewpoint Realty, a website that I think provides that information, but it doesn't provide information for private sales that don't occur through a realtor. And so by using deed transfer tax, then this information actually becomes public information, and so that information will be put in one place, and so that so people can view it if they have a question around whether or not their assessment is appropriate for what they deem to be a similar home to the one they live in. So anyway, with that, Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 73.
The question is for second reading of Bill number 73, the Municipal Governance Act. Is the host ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 73, entitled an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act.
Order the bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. I will now recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if we could go to address and reply to the speech from the throne.
Address and reply to the speech from the throne. I will now recognize the Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure today and an honour and a privilege to rise in my place to offer a response to the speech from the throne as presented by the former Lieutenant Governor, Her Honour May-Ann Francis, in this fourth session of the 61st General Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this time to congratulate her on her successful term. I had the pleasure on a number of occasions to speak to Her Honour during events and just some private times, just when things were settled down, because she was a very, very active and busy and engaged Lieutenant Governor. And I was always so impressed by her dignified nature, her soft and gentle and very much a caring approach to her, and a peer girl, that's right, Whitney Peer, approach to everything that she did in her delivering of messaging and just a general conversation. She was a tremendous role model, and I appreciated that as a woman. And I feel honored to have served in this House of Assembly under her term, Mr. Speaker. I wish her great success in everything that she does, and no doubt we will continue to hear about the great things that Her Honour May-Ann Francis, the former Lieutenant Governor, will do. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take this moment, before I move into some more relevant information and share my thoughts on our government and on the constituency of Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage, to take the time to say to you, Mr. Speaker, how proud I am to be a deputy of yours. And when I'm acting in that capacity, I know that I have some really big shoes to fill. What I am enjoying most, though, is the opportunity to bring forward a female identity to this role. And I know, and you know all too well, that I have been encouraging since my opportunity to play this role, to ask the members of this legislature to be mindful of when they're addressing each of us in our different roles, and certainly to encourage them to use the term Madam Speaker. So I'm going to apologize now for any time that they might in fact call you Madam Speaker. I know that happened earlier today a couple of times, and while I was kind of pleased and tickled that that happened, I was also a little embarrassed at the thoughts that they might confuse the two of us. So Rest assured that I'll be trying to bring a little more femininity to my role, and as you, your male characteristics. But to be completely honest, I am very honored to have this opportunity, and I enjoy working with you as well, the other deputies, and I appreciate this, the vote of confidence within the House of Assembly. To be rising as a member of the first NDP government caucus, and for me in the caucus in Nova Scotia, is especially great honor, Mr. Speaker. And after 3 years of having the governance of this province, this great province in Nova Scotia under our helm, I can tell you that I am more proud than ever to be part of that caucus. My role as a member of the Legislative Assembly is one that I take very seriously, Mr. Speaker, and it's an experience that I value very much in my life. It's an experience, as all of us know as members of this House, that offers opportunities for personal growth, for our own education, for friendships, for partnerships and compassion, and of course, the element of public service of the work that we do. I don't have to spell out the details of the role to you, Mr. Speaker, or any of our colleagues in the House, but we all know that it comes with long hours, many challenging and sometimes disappointing experiences. I recall a friend of mine in Eastern Passage, Mr. Speaker, expressing concern to me when I first talked about running in the political realm of provincial politics, party politics, having come from the level of governance, municipal politics, which is supposed to be nonpartisan. He talked of his experience in politics, not as an elected official, but as an active, engaged member of a political party. He talked about how it could get ugly and mean-spirited, and sometimes just quite cruel. He expressed his concern for me, someone who cared about my friends and family and community, someone that he respected, and he was concerned about being painted with a brush that I might not otherwise deserve. He talked of needing tough skin and broad shoulders. At that time, of course, Mr. Speaker, I thanked him for his insight and expression of care for me and protectiveness of me. I assured him that I believed I could handle it. Little did I know how much the test would be to that degree, particularly in this chamber at times. But when I face something challenging in this role, I take comfort in his words and I draw strength from them. A strength in knowing that elected officials before me, Mr. Speaker, have been put to the test, and they've been held accountable, and democracy and responsible government stood fast. Not only stood fast, but evolved over 250 years. Positive changes evolve out of mistakes, errors in judgment, and inadequate processes. And every level of government, every government that comes after the next, every MLA that steps into this chamber learns and grows from those and do their best to put new processes in place, as our government did. Mr. Speaker, despite these challenges, citizens in Nova Scotia, like you and I and other members of the House, have taken the steps of putting themselves out there and accepting the responsibility of running for office, being a public servant, a target for public scrutiny at a level beyond what most Nova Scotians would experience. We do it because we truly want to make life better for others, for Nova Scotians. We want the citizens of our constituencies to thrive and prosper and have a quality of life that is second to none. We want healthy citizens, well-educated children, employed neighbours, well-nourished families, and above all, happy lives. And we, the members sitting in this historic chamber, and all of those who, in our communities who voted for us, believed that we have the skills that could reach that goal. We believe in democracy and working collaboratively towards the common goals that will positively impact the lives of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe for 1 minute that's changed, as would sometimes probably be suggested here in the House of Assembly. In fact, I feel the true motivation and driving factors for each of us today is stronger than ever. Our citizens have elected this government because they felt we had the strength and endurance and the staying power, not only for the good stuff, but for the rougher moments as well. They elected a government, an NDP government, that they felt would work diligently to improve the governance of this province. They elected an NDP government who would work with them in their communities and work for them in this chamber. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you and every member of this House, during the difficult times and during the great and prosperous times that are before us and in our futures, that we stay the course, we carry out our duties for good citizens of their riding, and to the best of our abilities with honesty, integrity, and the passion that we felt when we first put our name on the ballot, however many years ago that was, for us all. Sometimes I see the actions in this House that are not necessarily ways that I think members would act if they were outside of this chamber. And I think that's such a shame sometimes when attacks or suggestions of character, flaws in character, and just flat-out accusations of inaccurate and erroneous calls would be hurled across the chamber from the opposition to members of government. I'm not convinced that they would do that outside of this chamber, and I just hope that when they leave, they give some thought to the measures that they're taking and ask themselves, is there another way to achieve a goal here that is better for Nova Scotians, not necessarily for their moment in glory and time in the chamber on the other side? Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia will be a better place to live and grow and enjoy due to our efforts through our NDP government under the leadership of our Honourable Premier, a leader who I respect and admire more every day. His strength and commitment to what he knows is right, with the support of my colleagues and his cabinet, is what this province needs, and it's what we now have. That I'm sure of, Mr. Speaker. I'm more sure now than ever. And we're working every day to deliver a plan that is, and we're continuing to stay the course on that plan to bring vitality, prosperity, and health to this province. What people should know is that our Premier and our Cabinet and our government is doing good business in this province. Important, effective, positive, forward-moving business for Nova Scotians. That's evident in so many of the initiatives that have been brought forward since our election 3 years ago. The Irving Shipyards contract investments, Churchill Falls, the petroleum exploration, etc. The people that elected us know that it is our government they're looking to address the challenges that our province faces. Under the leadership of our Premier, we can and will make those tough decisions. We've proven that, even when they're unpopular to some. We're doing things differently. We're putting this province on a different path forward. We're on the right track as part of our four-year financial plan that will get Nova Scotia back to balance and make sure we live within our means. And plans for a bright future for all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, not just a privileged few. We're creating good jobs and growing the economy. We're educating students. We're making lives more affordable for our citizens, protecting our communities and the people at risk of violence in their lives, and making roads safer. We're also improving health care, addressing obesity in children, addressing issues with cyberbullying, promoting active and healthy lifestyles. We're working hard to make life better for Nova Scotians, especially those who are facing the most difficult challenges coming out of a recession. Some of the things that we're investing in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, are potentially the most monumental changes that we've ever had in Nova Scotia. Better care, our plan for better care sooner is addressing a health care system that took years and years and years under other governments to create the deficits, the gaps, the shortfalls, the lack in the labor unrest, the loss of nursing capacity, the difficult attraction to doctors in our communities. But our plan is addressing that. For instance, our plan to address emergency room closures and the long waits that people have had in waiting for procedures and surgeries. This has plagued our Nova Scotia's healthcare system for years, Mr. Speaker, but our plan is moving forward. It will take time, but we're making progress. Progress in ways like investing in collaborative emergency centres, working with our partners, our paramedics, our nurses, our communities, to bring our nurse practitioners, to bring collaborative efforts to help address all of the needs of our communities in a way that is not a silo. It's about working together. We're investing in our seniors, Mr. Speaker. We're investing in the number of home visits that our seniors, we know our seniors want to continue to live in their own homes. We know that it can be challenging. We know that our constituents, their family, friends, and loved ones are picking up some of the gaps that might be there to help support them in their own homes. But as a government, we're seeing that and we're investing in that so more people can have access to supports and home visits. And also in home nursing care. There are opportunities for us to be in that resident's home to do the nursing care that they need that allows them to stay there a little bit longer. Supportive home improvements, more support for home improvements. We know that as we age, I know at my age, and I'm not quite as elder as some of the members in this House, but, and I know I'm looking better, but I know, I can tell, I can feel the change in me as I progress through my journey of life, that I can't necessarily get up on the roof and repair it anymore as I used to do before my darling husband came along. I cannot, and I know that as a senior citizen in their community who is living in their home, how particularly difficult that might be. Also to face the challenges of the change in their income, of having left an enjoyable and a prosperous and a successful career, to be in their own home knowing they're not quite sure how are they going to fix those windows, how are they going to repair that roof. Well, we're helping them, Mr. Speaker. Our NDP government is investing in support for home improvements, for accessibility, to help with their mobility issues. And to help them deal and respond to their medication needs in a way that is safer and more financially accessible. We're also increasing our investment in long-term care beds, Mr. Speaker, and that is particularly relevant. Although we know that many of our families are facing that challenge, that decision in their own lives, and as much as we would like much as we would like our family members to be able to stay at home, there are times when it just isn't possible. And for the betterment of the entire family, through a tough decision, there is a decision to enter the long-term care industry, long-term care home environment. But we're investing in that. Ocean View Manor, continuing care, Ocean View, sorry, they just changed their name. That's why and I just did a resolution on it. Ocean View Continuing Care Centre, used to be Ocean View Manor Society, is a beautiful example of that. They are doing such tremendous care. They have such a wonderful staff and administration and a board of directors and a volunteer team that is second to none, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker. I would brag about them every chance I get. I had the opportunity to be on that board. I continue to play a role as the MLA and as a resident of the area. I continue to encourage our young people to volunteer. They have a tremendous youth volunteer program at that centre. And I know they're very proud of what they've done. It's gone through an evolution of having been established many, many years ago, and now subsequently with changes in amalgamation and such, it took on a not-for-profit designation. But they're innovative. In fact, their administrator, Dion Moulin, is one of the leading industry spokespersons. He's innovative. He's got great ideas. He's at the table, and they're proving to be leaders in that long-term care industry, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very proud of that, having that in the community of Eastern Passage. Back to what we're doing as a government, Mr. Speaker, we're creating jobs. I can't think of a better thing to be able to say. In Nova Scotia, we're creating jobs. And we're doing that through our Jobs Here plan, Mr. Speaker. Over the next 30 years, Nova Scotia will benefit from significant investments in the shipbuilding, in Lower Churchill Falls hydroelectric power project, in the Shell oil offshore exploration project. All of these things are about creating jobs. Good Nova Scotia money going into strong projects that will deliver the jobs that our Nova Scotians want and deserve. These investments will boost our economy, Mr. Speaker. The capital investments in machinery, technology, equipment for businesses, investments in workplaces for students. We know our students want to stay in Nova Scotia. We know that they need opportunities, and this kind of investment to help connect our students to the jobs that they need after their post-secondary education or even after high school. That's what our government is doing. Our investments in productivity and innovation and our skills incentive program is also making a significant impact on the economy of Nova Scotia. Another area that we're investing in is our education. Our Kids and Learning First plan, Mr. Speaker, is a serious plan to change the face of education in Nova Scotia. That again, we are not going to fix it all overnight. It takes time. There are incremental steps that we're making, but we're facing those serious challenges with specific strategies, specific projects, specific investments, specific funding to address that downward trend, even though our student populations are going down. And we hope that our measures are going to change that. We want to change that downward trend. We want our young people who are of childbearing age, I'll say it out loud, our young members from like Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville, who have brought his beautiful daughter into the legislature today, we want her to grow up and have the opportunity to fulfill her life here in Nova Scotia. Our students are suffering because of the trends of the past in education, but we're taking steps to change that. Our Schools Plus expansion, our investment in Schools Plus is a great example. Our increased funding per student, which is the highest as ever been before in Nova Scotia, another example. The increase of our number of schools offering skilled trades. Again, this is going to come back to the prosperity that is on our horizon, is continue to be molded and massaged and worked on the shipbuilding contract. And the skilled trades is the future for our young people. It's on our horizon, and we need to do those investments now. We are making those steps. Well, I'm going to get to some of that. Like what? A member has asked me, like building schools. Our investment, of course, you know I would talk about that because it's an exciting opportunity, not only for the constituency of Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, but for all of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, our investment in the skilled trades, the announcement on April 2nd at Cole Harbour High about a specific state-of-the-art skilled trade centre at Cole Harbour High is an exciting an important element of the future of this province in shipbuilding and in those trades. I know the opposition members, and particularly the Progressive Conservative Party, are against these schools. I know that they're against it. They've always been. That's been evident in the 10 years that they were in this chamber when I and my predecessor, Kevin DeVoe, came in here and our NDP party supported those a high school for Eastern Passage. But what's even better, Mr. Speaker, what is more exciting now is that I knew, and my conversations with the Honourable Premier, because he is in the riding of Cole Harbour, we talked about it didn't have to be a negative, for which is what was being presented. It could be good. I can't think of a better way for us to invest in Nova Scotians at the same time, Mr. Speaker, as turning a page for Cole Harbour High. I'm so excited that Cole Harbour High, which is a school, Mr. Speaker, it's no surprise, has had a stigma attached to it for many years, right or wrong, whether they earned it or not. They ended up with people saying, I did not want my children to go there. But this changes the chapter. It takes it into a new chapter. It turns the page. This opportunity makes Cole Harbour the destination school for many, many students who would like to pursue that in-classroom direct link to jobs and skills and training that would put them in the right place to take advantage of the jobs that are going to be associated with shipbuilding and any other trades that are in Nova Scotia. And of course, that connection, that link to the classroom will then evolve into other jobs. Mr. Speaker, also our launch of our cyberbullying social marketing campaign. And we've introduced legislation associated with that. It's in the chamber. I won't speak too much about that. It's in the law amendments now. There were recommendations that came from the cyberbullying task force, and while this is just attempting to address one element of it, it is the right step. Again, this phenomenon of cyberbullying, bullying in general, is such a complicated and catastrophic phenomenon that is hurting so many of our citizens worldwide. This is not new. This is the solutions are not black and white, but we are taking steps. We brought the experts together. We dialogued with those who are experiencing it. If we could have had some ability to talk to every student in Nova Scotia, every young person in Nova Scotia that might have a phone or access to the internet, if we could have tapped into every one of them, I'm confident that we probably could have created a scenario that they would know the solution. But we had created a team of people, including police and educators and health and justice, and then those in our communities who have unfortunately had the devastating effects of the ultimate cost associated to bullying and cyberbullying, which is a catastrophic loss in their own family. I had a member of our community in Eastern Passage, young Emily. I attended a funeral of hers that was no one should ever have to experience, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so proud that our government is taking steps and looking at this seriously. Before I was an elected official, I pursued an education for myself around bullying and cyberbullying as a municipal councillor, attended a number of conferences, and one of the things they regularly called for was changes to legislation. Put it front and foremost on people's minds, and that is what our government is doing, and I'm thankful for that. Mr. Speaker, our government is also making life more affordable for Nova Scotians. Our investment in the personal income tax reductions is an example of that. We have more relief for first-time home buyers, and I can tell you, first-time home buyers are in Eastern Passage and Cole Harbour. As a designated growth area for HRM, we have a lot of homes being built, and we are the place that our young people are choosing to plant their roots, live in a community that is so close to the heart of the province, the capital, but yet in an environment such as Eastern Passage and Cole Harbour that still has that small town unity, loyalty, cooperation. So that relief for first-time home buyers is evident in the riding of Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage. We're investing in more dollars for persons with disabilities, Mr. Speaker. I had the pleasure of attending, on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Community Services, the groundbreaking for Dask Industries over in Burnside recently, and what a pleasure that was. I have many constituents who have or continue to be engaged in the services provided there. You know, we wore a pin that had Dask Industry, and it made me think there's probably not a politician in Nova Scotia, certainly not in the local area, that hasn't had some form of pin from Dask Industries on their lapel in some campaign, whether it was their own or someone they were supporting at a different level of government. Those investments are counting. They count for something. We're holding a line as well on user fees in this province. Our seniors are receiving return from their provincial income taxes. Those who are receiving a guaranteed income supplement are getting their income taxes returned to them. That is helping our seniors in Nova Scotia. Our increased investments in our students as well, Mr. Speaker, and student assistance. I can attest to that again. I'm a mother of 3 young men now. I can't say young boys. I have 3 boys. My youngest is about to graduate from high school. My middle is attending university with the career of the goal of being an anesthesiologist. That's 11 years, Mr. Speaker. That's 11 years. So those kinds of investments are allowing our Nova Scotian students, our Nova Scotia youth, or anyone who pursues post-secondary education, those opportunities when they may not have otherwise had them. Our tax changes, like our Nova Scotia Affordable Living Tax Credit and our Poverty Reduction Credit, Mr. Speaker. Those are all investments in Nova Scotia. Tax reduction for small businesses from prior to our investment in tax, our reduction in small taxes, in small business taxes had not been done prior to since 1992, but we did that, Mr. Speaker. Our reduction, forgive me, I can't read my own writing, so I'm not quite sure what, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. Our graduate retention rebate, Mr. Speaker, allowing our Nova Scotian graduates to invest, to stay here and open up shop or be gainfully employed here in our own communities in Nova Scotia. These, Mr. Speaker, are things that I'm very proud to be part of. I'm going to get a little more personal at this stage, Mr. Speaker, just for a moment, because I know that, and you know, many of my colleagues in the House from all parties have spoken of the tremendous support that their family and friends have given them in their lives as we pursue and fulfill our roles in the legislature. And it's important to acknowledge them in our lives. My family's no different, Mr. Speaker. In particular, my mom and dad, and Shelburne, Frank, and Vivi Scott. They watch over me. They continue to watch for news. They're very proud of me. But just as important, Mr. Speaker, they're senior citizens in our province that are expecting us to do our jobs and make life better for them. They challenge me. I can tell you, my biggest challenge is probably my dad. He and I are a bit alike in that we're a bit, we're assertive and and we can hold our own in a conversation. And one of my measures of when I first considered being an elected official was if I could get through a debate with my dad without throwing something at him, I was doing well, and I did. But he continues to test me, and I sounded like a South Shore girl on that one. I know, I heard it myself, and that is where I'm from in Shelburne, and I'm proud of that. But they do challenge me, and they want us to make good decisions. More specifically, the support that I receive from my husband, Jerry. My husband. I don't think I've said that in this house yet. I've been blessed to find love again in my life, Mr. Speaker, and I married my true love, my rock, Jerry Goldsworthy, last year. And he is my rock. He's my biggest fan. He's my protector. He brings strength in my life that I need to do this role and the grounding that I need. And I thank God every day for bringing him into my life. My boys, Tyler, Isaac, and Matthew, they're finding their own way. They're becoming young men, and they put me to the test as a mother. But they're very proud of the work that I do. But they're also one of the driving forces that continues to push me to be an MLA or be an elected official, be an advocate for my community, be an advocate for the voice of youth. And they continue to remind me every day when I go to bed at night, when I'm tired and I get home and I'm wondering, have they been fed? Did I get a chance to get out and get the groceries? How are they doing with their course selection? What are they doing to think about their future? They are my constant reminder that I'm doing something good for the province, good for our community, and good for humanity. So I'm thankful that they are there and they're supportive, and I'm thankful that that they challenge me as well. Even don't tell them. That's all. Don't tell them that I like that. It's important for me as well, Mr. Speaker, to thank a particular woman in my constituency, which is my constituency assistant, Margaret Keats-Logan, for her outstanding performance and outstanding work that she does in the constituency office of Cole-Harbour and Eastern Passage. We all know in this House that that role is unlike any other that you'd probably find in most administrative roles. CAs, constituency assistants, are the extension of us in our absence in our constituencies. And Margaret offers the constituents at Cole-Harbour and Eastern Passage a compassionate, thoughtful, professional, and productive service when they come into our office looking for help or guidance or an ear to hear their concerns, and I am thankful for her. My constituents as well take the time to tell me what a great job she's doing, Mr. Speaker, so I want to go on record as saying that I am thankful for the work that she continues to do on my behalf and on the behalf of the constituents of Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage. At this stage, Mr. Speaker, I have no idea how much time I have left. Could I ask?
About 30 minutes.
Oh, perfect. I'd be remiss if I did not take some time, Mr. Speaker, to speak very deliberately about the constituency of Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage. My constituency is made up of roughly four communities. Cole Harbour, of which I have the pleasure of sharing the general community of Cole Harbour with the Premier. We have Shearwater, which is a community in and of itself, Eastern Passage, and then Cow Bay. Each of them have their own unique identities, and I'd like to share a few comments about each of them. The community of Cole Harbour, with its many great schools and trails and sports organizations and engaged citizens, are connected to the Dartmouth-Cole Harbour area. Mr. Speaker, volunteerism is strong in that part of my riding, as it probably is in most, but it certainly is in the entire riding. But they're particularly strong out there because they have such a larger, relative to the to some of the communities in the Dartmouth side of HRM, have a relatively large geographic area, and to stay connected is often the result of a lot of volunteer hours on a lot of service groups and a lot of organizations that show community pride, community spirit, community advocacy. And they're doing that. Much of the activities in that part of the constituency focus around two elementary schools, Caldwell Road School and Astral Drive Elementary School, and as well the Astral Drive Junior High School. Mr. Speaker, Millbrook First Nations community is also nestled centrally in between Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage. Mr. Speaker, the Premier and I share the absolutely magnificent provincial park on Bissett Road. Miles of trails connect the Shearwater Flyer to the Salt Marsh Trail and the Bissett Road Trail system, and which also continues to connect to Lawrencetown, which continues to connect down the eastern shore. But countless hours of volunteerism has created this hidden jewel, and I would invite every member of this legislature and anyone in Nova Scotia to come and visit the Bissett Road, the Salt Marsh Trail, in just off Bissett Road. There's parts of it that's Cole Harbour, and there's parts of it that's Cow Bay, so it's a little hard to define. But come on out and see it. You will be amazed. This is a provincial park, but has been basically developed by the Cole Harbour Parks and Trails Association, which is a volunteer organization, under the helm of the chair, Holly Woodall, and under the tremendous activities and energy and of Jim Tudor, and there are other members that I can't remember all their names, but they know who they are. The countless hours of dedication, a gift that they have given Nova Scotia, a gift that they have given HRM, a gift that they have given the Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage. Through their dedication, their passion, their sweat equity, and their shared determination, because I know that their members in here know that their volunteer organizations sometimes face some of the most difficult challenges with partnerships and funding sources and such, but their determination, I can't stress that strong enough, that you should come out and see what we've developed out there, and they've developed, I should say. I thank each and every one of them for their efforts and their commitments to not only Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage, but all of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, if you made your way out these days, you'd see what is now the remnants. Maybe there's very little left of what was a heritage, historic icon of the community in that area, which is the big red barn that burned to the ground last year. That barn was an icon of that era, icon of that community. And while the province owns this land and the barn there's work being done to resurrect some form of a building and infrastructure that will emulate and celebrate the heritage associated to that burn and what it stood for in that community. A community that continues to offer a rural setting in the backyard of suburban HRM, Mr. Speaker, is Cow Bay. And the protection of the rural lifestyle and environment continues to be the forefront of the minds of the residents in that area. As a coastal community, Mother Nature offers particular challenges. Erosion, storm surges threaten to undermine the environment that many families have settled and built their lives on. But this very same rugged coastline offers some of the best surfing locations that Nova Scotia has to offer, Mr. Speaker. And I don't know how many of you knew that, but we are the destination, one of the most popular destinations for surfing locations. In Cow Bay, there are at least 4, I think they call them surfs, and it's the section of the ocean that creates particular kinds of waves that allow these surfers to do what they do best. And we've had young people in our community who are now traveling to Australia. I know that they've gone New Zealand to compete in surfing championships because of their experience in their own backyard, in their own ocean, that their moms and dads probably said, be careful when you go down to the rocks, be careful when you go along the beach, because the tides, Rainbow Haven is down in that area. Rainbow Haven is a provincial park that is it's a lot like Lawrencetown Park, and the waves and the surge and the undertow. You have to be so careful of the actions of the ocean, particularly when young people are not necessarily as cognizant and paying as much attention to what's going on around them when they're laughing and having fun and probably flirting with a boy or a girl. But they are, because of these surf locations, our young people are learning an appreciation, a respect, and a value in what they have. So I'm really pleased to see some development of some access, coastal access to these waters. The coastal access in these areas have been primarily through private property. And it's been challenging, because you'd have visitors and locals alike wanting to access the shoreline, but they'd have to trespass to do it. Which caused significant problems for the residents in the area. They didn't want to not have them access the water, but accessing it through private property left garbage and wear and tear, and sometimes inappropriate, perhaps changing on the side of the road trying to get into their surf gear, and it was challenging. But the community came together, they worked together to form a coalition and a park in that area that is dedicated specifically. It's called the Cow Bay Surf Park, and we're so pleased that turn of events, that initiative and project is coming along so well. The Cow Bay Moose Park, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but the Cow Bay Moose continues to be there, a big statue of the Cow Bay Moose. Years and years ago, and I don't know how many, there's Silver Sands beaches there, and there were a number of large statues built of animals and fish and all things like that. And over the years, they've deteriorated, but the Cow Bay Moose is still on the hill. And that look-off would probably be the start of many Nova Scotians, the conception of Nova Scotians. That particular park, I don't know if there's a better way to put it. And it probably still does, although I'm hoping it's not too young. But that's an icon of the community, and it's an important aspect that I'm so pleased to have been part of while I was on council, and since becoming a member of the legislature and our government supporting the development of the park to recognize the heritage. I was on council, yes, to recognize the heritage and the importance of that particular location. Silver Sands Beach actually took a bit of a hit when they created Shearwater at the turn of the century. But this was a destination, a summer vacation destination. There were pictures of parasols and tents. The whole beach was the place to visit, as was McNabb's Island. The Coney Island of Halifax was McNabb's Island. No, it's the truth. It's the truth. And we have lots of details I could share with you on that, but I'll save that for another day. But Silver Sands Conservation Society is made up of a group of people who want to protect and preserve the natural habitat of the Cow Bay area. Elizabeth Quint, Donald Huzak, Todd King, are to name just a few, and I know there are many more that are really a driving force behind. They're the watchful eye, and our communities all need that element, and I'm so thankful for their contribution. Another unique community that I talk about quite regularly is the community of Shearwater, made up of military families associated to the military, particularly to 12 Wing Shearwater. It's a community that is used to the transient nature of the residents, where one might stay for 1 or 2 or 3 years at a time and then be posted to a new location. But ultimately, it's not uncommon for them eventually to come back to Nova Scotia, which is so nice to settle, because they had such a tremendous experience. I think I did a resolution in the House not that long ago along that line, that people had left, but they grew up here as a military child, and they'd had such a great experience they wanted to come back. The town council, it's interesting because it traditionally has always been sort of transient and people would come and leave, they didn't always have the opportunity or even have sense that they could put down roots and really engage in their community. But a gentleman by the name of Glenn Johnson, I know he's not a corporal, I think he is Sergeant Glenn Johnson. He's the town councillor. They created a town council of their own, and now they actually received the Lieutenant Governor's Vibrant Communities Award. They participate in community cleanups and beautification projects and house decorating, and so they really have a sense of identity now, which is so nice. And I can tell you, I told them this story, that when I was first elected back on council, one of the things that was said to me was, you know, don't spend a lot of time going up and knocking on the doors of people at Shearwater, because they don't really vote. They aren't really part of the community. Well, that's changed. I didn't believe it. I went and knocked on the doors anyway. And I believe that they feel that they are part of the community now. They are shaping their own community, and they are certainly part of the greater community of the Dartmouth area and Woodside, Cole Harbour, and Eastern Passage. And great efforts are going on down there. The 12 Wing Shearwater is approaching a milestone, and I know I've mentioned that in the House before, Mr. Speaker. Probably the most renowned event at Shearwater, or not event, icon of Shearwater is the Sea King helicopter, the home of the Sea King helicopter for Nova Scotia. We, as residents of the area, have lived with and enjoyed the hover, the sound, the activity associated with the Sea King, despite popular belief that the criticisms that it's had. They are celebrating its 50th anniversary. That's a lot of years to be a good, strong, productive aircraft for our Canadian military. And it's something that I believe we as Nova Scotians should be celebrating. I hope that I can invite you all to the summer is when the anniversary will take place, and the Sea King will be decommissioned, and the new Sikorsky helicopters will be officially moved into that position. But I know that the effort, the trades, the service of our men and women who have maintained and supported and developed that helicopter have done right by us here in Nova Scotia in the protection of our country, and the long-standing service that helicopter has provided for the protection of our nation. And I think it's important that we celebrate that when the opportunity comes along, so I look forward to that. There's lots of other things going on in Eastern Passage around service clubs and festivals. Our community is the same as most across Nova Scotia. There are festivals and activities. There's a summer carnival. There's a harvest festival. There's a Christmas festival. There's service clubs like the Lions Club, the Buffalo Club, the Legion, the Kiwanis, the Buffalo Club. They're doing great things at the Buffalo Club. I'm so very proud of them. I'm so pleased to be a partner on so many things with them. Most recently, they hosted Battle of the Bands. It's the third year for doing it, and each year they're a service club that is meant to create opportunities and funds to give back to the community. Oh, no, that's the Fred Flintstone version of the Buffalo, the Royal Order of the Lodge. I say a Lodge of Buffaloes. No, not quite. They don't wear the big hats. But they are so proud of what they do. I'm so proud of what they do, and they most recently hosted the Battle of the Bands, which gave an opportunity for young, new bands and entertainers to take to the stage and wow the judges and wow the audience that was there. And yes, thank you. One of my colleagues reminded me that I had a beautiful wedding reception there as well. I couldn't think of a better place to have a reception. That's my kind of place, is the Buffalo Club. I grew up in Shelburne, where all of our events were at the Legions and the Lions Club. So when Jerry and I decided to have our wedding reception there, I just can't think of a better place to have had it. The atmosphere, the decorating, the joy around us really started our life together off perfectly. And I'm thankful that that's in our community. We have a great connection and partnership with our policing services. The Cole Harbour Eastern Passage area is policed by the RCMP. There is some involvement in the HRP, Halifax Regional Police, because it's a collaborative policing service, but some areas are dedicated specifically to them, and Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage has the RCMP, and they're doing great things to keep our community safe and proactively address crime prevention and youth initiatives to change and shape the lives of our young people in the way of crime prevention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're developing a BMX track in Eastern Passage. That will be the very first BMX racetrack in Nova Scotia, and it will be an Olympic qualifying track. So some great things are happening in these communities. Lawlers, I spoke briefly on Lawlers and Devil's Island and McNabb's Island. They're part of the constituency. Great efforts are being done by the Friends of McNabb's Island Society. They've been doing advocacy and efforts on the island for years, but there's also a new initiative through the Eastern Passage area called the Gateway to McNabb's Island, and that they're looking at bringing more attention to the facts that the access to the islands has been historically through Eastern Passage. The connection to the islands have been through Eastern Passage. People can access from Halifax, they can access from Dartmouth, but there is a definitive and very long-standing historical connection between Eastern Passage and McNabb's and Lawlers Island, and that's what this organization is dedicated to bring to the forefront, and hopefully bring opportunities for the businesses who ferry people back and forth to the islands. We have tailor-made tours, and Captain Redbeard, Mike Tilley's small craft that they use to get to the island, and that's only the beginning of things. At this point, though, I don't want to use up all my time without talking about the Fisherman's Cove area. We're doing great things. That area took a bit of a hit over the downturn of tourism. The changes in capacity on boards, the changes in the level of input from volunteerism. But I am so proud to say that there is a new board developing at Fisherman's Cove. There are new strong leaders of the community who have come to the table, are redeveloping the board to create some new strategies, a new vision, and just new energy and prosperity, bringing prosperity back to Fisherman's Cove. People have continued to visit Fisherman's Cove, even though not all the shops were active and vibrant and had businesses in them. But those days are changing. Every day I hear about a new shop that's opening, so come back and visit it. Lastly, before I go in too much further, and I know my time is running out, I cannot missed the opportunity to speak of the tremendous news of the $15 million investment of a high school for Eastern Passage, Mr. Speaker. 30 years is a long time for a community to be advocating for keeping their students in their own community to be educated. They watched a number of opportunities come and go through other governments where schools were somewhat promised to a community, and then at the 11th hour, the political will of the time changed this dynamics, and they continued to bust their kids, the Eastern Passage kids, out of that community. And when the SHIPS contract came along, it was like the light turning on. Here is an opportunity, not only for Cole Harbour, but for Eastern Passage. And I'm so proud to have stood by the Premier on April 2nd and the Honourable Minister of Education to announce to the families of Eastern Passage that they would, in fact, be getting their high school. I'm proud to have been part of a government that listened. It was no surprise that our government would support that. It's no surprise because we spent close to 15 years in this House of Assembly through myself and through my predecessor, Kevin DeVoe, and I know support from colleagues. Yeah, don't forget him. Talking about the need, the want, the desire. And what I'm so proud of, though, is that we've done it in a way that is responsible to the pressures of the day, the financial pressures of the day, where we've done it in a way that is attentive to the needs of the areas affected in the general location in the Cole Harbour Eastern Passage. That's the family of schools that are most affected. The two announcements teamed up together was such a great day and such a positive step for both schools, And anyone would argue with that, I say shame on them. I was so proud to be able to see and share that information and that project, the news of that project, with members of our community like Jeep DeVoe, who was a founding father of advocacy for high schools in Eastern Passage, Dot White, Elsie Johnson, teachers who have taught the kids in our community and they're now in their senior years, that had heard the desire, the need, the want, the desire, and the practical solutions and reasons why. It wasn't just because I want it. The community had put forward so many times the facts, the basis for why it made sense, and so many times it was denied and tabled and shoved aside. But no longer, Mr. Speaker. The community of Eastern Passage is engaged again. They feel good. They feel valued. They feel like they've been heard. They feel like they feel, can I finish and then? Okay, thank you. I'm almost done. You know what? It's okay. I got that covered. I know that the community is happy. There are people in the opposition seats, and I know there's still challenges with some of the dynamics on the school board that would tell you that this is a bad idea. But I can tell you, after three successful elections, 3 elections where I canvassed 80 to 90% of the homes in the riding of Cole Harbour and Eastern Passage, that a high school for Eastern Passage was the #1 priority for that area, and I'm proud to have stood by the Premier, proud to be part of a government that listened, supported, and invested in this community. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would take my place, and I thank you very much for this opportunity.
I recognize the member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to draw the attention of members of the House to the Speaker's Gallery, where we have here before us the member Member of Parliament for Dartmouth Cole Harbour, and I believe it would be a year ago yesterday that he was elected as that member. Also, Mr. Speaker, we have Matthew Spurway, who is his constituency assistant. We know that Robert Chisholm is working very hard for his constituents, and I believe he was just appointed as the fisheries critic for the official opposition in Ottawa. So ask the members to give him a warm welcome, please.
I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today. We wish you to now rise to meet from the hours of 9 to 9 tomorrow. We will do, after the daily routine, bills for second reading, Bill 74, 76, and 77. And also committee the whole House on bills, and if time permits, we may do some address and reply, Mr. Speaker. So I wish you to now rise, and the House meet again tomorrow at 9 a.m.
The motion on the floor is for adjournment and to meet tomorrow at the hour of 9 a.m. All those in favor of the motion say aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion is passed, and we now move to late debate for today, and the motion to be debated. Therefore, be it resolved that the NDP has repeatedly chosen Nova Scotia Power shareholders over ratepayers, supports ratepayers funding the bonuses of executives, and have become the defenders of big business in Nova Scotia following the tradition of successive Conservative governments in Nova Scotia, submitted by the member for Yarmouth. I now recognize the member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise in this continuing discussion on energy issues. You know, in the past week, and in fact in other sessions, we repeatedly asked the Minister of Energy very directly. The media also have asked the Minister of Energy and the Premier very directly whether he supports the inclusion of bonuses in the rates paid by Nova Scotia Power's shareholders. And repeatedly he has refused to say that he does not think they should be included. Refused. Simple thing. And the only reason to avoid it, of course, is if the minister believes that ratepayers should be stuck with the costs of the bonuses of the executives of Nova Scotia Power. And that's a shame. You know, the NDP like to make a lot of the fact that they took the HST off of electricity. But let's not forget that that saving resulted in $28 million, and then they added a tax that took $40 million. So in the end, while they certainly did what they said they would on the HST, as it relates to those power bills, they did not tell Nova Scotians that they would actually add a new tax that takes more from Nova Scotians than the one that they were removing. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, what makes matters worse on that is the fact that 6 days before the election, the Premier's Chief of Staff, writing on behalf of the NDP caucus, stated that he felt, and the NDP caucus felt, that shareholders of Nova Scotia Power should be the ones to pay for efficiency charges. Because I think everybody agrees that conservation is extremely important. And yet, after getting elected, the NDP passed legislation which resulted directly in Nova Scotia Power rate holders being forced to pay that fee. Now, the Premier has stood up many times in this House and suggested that the URB made that decision, and so I asked the URB chair that question yesterday in public accounts, and he was very clear. He said, no, the act which the government passed only gives the option to have that fee charged against ratepayers. And yes, certainly they set the ultimate rate. There's no question about that. because the Act requires them to. But the URB was quite clear that they did not make that choice. In fact, they were stuck with only one choice, and that was to charge ratepayers. When the NDP were in opposition, they didn't like the Utility and Review Board very much. We've tabled a number of quotes. For example, tabled a number of quotes from a number of members, in fact, suggesting that the URB was in the pockets of Nova Scotia Power. That's what the members over there now in the cabinet benches suggested when they were in opposition. And yet now, one after another, they stand up and defend and say that the URB will decide in an impartial and independent way. Yesterday, we found out yet another fact, that all along the Premier has been suggesting that the Muskrat Falls project would certainly be reviewed by the Utility and Review Board in Nova Scotia. And the chair said no, unless it's under Section 35, which means that it would have to be a project being built by Nova Scotia Power. They will be unable to review it, and that it will require a legislative amendment. And he was quoted again in the Herald today saying it will require a legislative amendment, not a regulatory change, a legislative amendment. But the Premier was given the option yesterday to admit his mistake, which people make mistakes. The Premier could have said, listen, we recognize that, we thought we could do it, we'll bring in that amendment. But instead he said, no, the chair of the board is wrong. And there's the chair of the board saying it in the media again this morning, that the Premier is wrong. And after all the broken promises of the NDP, I think I'm going to believe the chair of the URB when he says that they've decided they don't have the power over the Premier. You know, yesterday the NDP tried to say that the Liberal caucus was in favor of deregulation of the energy markets for supporting the exact thing that the member for Halifax Chebucto and member for Halifax or Cape Breton Centre have spoken in favor of repeatedly. Many times have they spoken in favor of that. Well, that's really strange. Then one of the members in the backbenches stood up yesterday and said 20 years ago the NDP would have gotten us off coal. Well, that was funny for the member for Cape Breton Centre, who was looking back in surprise when he realized that he was one of the great champions of coal 20 years ago. The fact is that everybody, or many people in Nova Scotia, didn't recognize the impacts of things like global warming and so forth. So those have only come along in the past few years. And there was even the last piece of legislation that the NDP brought in on renewable energy, they like to talk about how that legislation includes a 40% target. Well, go back and check Hansard, Mr. Speaker, because that only includes 40% in the legislation because the Liberals did an amendment that the government accepted that made it part of the law. You're welcome. It wasn't in the law. It actually wasn't in the law, and whether that was an error that it wasn't in there, I'm not sure, but it wasn't in the law until the amendment, and the government acknowledged that in the debate and accepted our amendment at the time. And so, you know, that's extremely, I think that's extremely important to remember. And so then we take a look at this corporations and big business and the handing out of money without anything. All the things the NDP said they wouldn't do, that they were opposed to. So you hand out $50 million to Resolute without protecting the pensions. And the Premier said, well, the pension is fully funded. Well, no, it was backed up by the lands that the province just bought from them. You know, and now that other $40 million, which I understand from the Premier is also for a possible future land purchase, would mean that more of that pension, more of that asset base that's there to protect the pension would be gone. So the more and more of that is sold, the more and more that just isn't there. And so all the things that the NDP sat there in opposition and criticized the Conservatives for, they're now doing. In fact, one of my professors from King's, Bruce Wark, one of the most interesting things I heard him say, he said, the NDP are more conservative than the Conservatives were. And, you know, he was a long time NDP supporter, and he's sitting there going, but of course, we know it doesn't stop there. We know that, you know, when we look at the way that the tax break for the Imperial Oil Refinery in Dartmouth was structured, well, the NDP spoke against that in opposition. The Premier voted against it in opposition when the Tories introduced it. And so the Premier stood up today or yesterday in question period and said, even, despite the fact that he voted against it when he was in opposition and spoke out against it, he stood up and he said, well, we're not actually giving them a tax break. Well, no, that's right. You're forcing the municipality to do it. And the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations was quoted in the media recently. I don't remember the exact quote, but something along the line, well, we couldn't reach an agreement with the municipality, so we had to go ahead with it. Well, if it was so important, why didn't the province use its own revenues? I guess it wasn't that important. And Mr. Speaker, now we know from Larry Hughes, who has noted that actually that tax break may result in an increase in gas prices because of the way that that refinery operates and is structured. Well, and he said it probably will expedite the closure of that refinery because of the way that refinery is structured. And listen, there's a guy who knows those energy issues far better than probably anybody in this House. So we have the Premier who voted against. The Premier voted against that tax break in opposition and then defended it now. And he said, well, we didn't give them the money. No, you forced the municipality to give them the money. It makes no sense. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, the energy prices, electricity prices have increased by 20% since the NDP took office, and 40% over the combined Tory and NDP governments. And that's something has to be done about energy prices. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to rise and speak to the resolution that the NDP government has repeatedly chosen Nova Scotia Power shareholders over ratepayers. I'm here, stand up here to say that this government has never chosen Nova Scotia Power over ratepayers. And of all the things the official opposition has ever said about this government, be they based in fact or fiction, this is the lowest, most mean-spirited, hurtful statement that we are following the tradition of the Conservatives in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the New Democratic Party represents new ideas, a new way of doing things, nothing at all like the tired old parties of the past. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives sold Nova Scotia Power in 1992, sold a valuable asset owned by the people of Nova Scotia, a short-term gain for long-term pain. Pain to the ratepayers to this day, for that matter. Further to this, Mr. Speaker, the contract with Nova Scotia Power makes provision for a reasonable rate of return on investment. This reasonable rate of return is determined by the Utility Review Board under criteria established in the terms and conditions of the sale. Now, Mr. Speaker, the URB, in presentation to